Brian.Bowman@megaport.com, solution architecture here in the North America team. So this example, I'm showing you a drawing of just a port here at the data center, existing setup with some VLANs that go down to the Virginia area. So think of this as, AWS US East 1, Virginia region, Azure US East 4, US East 1. US East 1, US East 2, something like that, right? So connecting down to the Virginia area. And all the traffic is going cloud to data center. So any traffic that goes cloud to cloud right now would hairpin through the data center and then come back through this link here. And so we're going to talk about, well, how would this customer migrate to a Megaport cloud router? What does that look like? And of course, I'm showing this on a Megaport solution today, but this could be with another provider. It could be IPsec tunnels that traverse down to this data center. So it could be running over internet today. And so what does this look like? So we're going to go into the portal here. And I'll come back and show you a drawing in a minute, but I want to kind of kick off this in the portal just so we can get kind of the API activity running. So that does take a few minutes to kick off. So we'll go ahead and build this out, this new architecture. So what I'm showing you here is the existing connection. So there's we're using the Cyrus 1 data center in Totowa, and there's a physical port there. There's a couple of VLANs that extend down to the Virginia region. And you'll notice these are in configured state. They're not active. With Megaport, these will turn green when they're active. And the reason why they're not green is because I just set them up about an hour ago, and I haven't actually connected this in the data center. So there's no light on this port today. So it's just going to show up as configured. But let's go ahead and start building out these components. So you'll see here on the top, we have the access components, we call them. This customer, of course, only has a port today, but we're going to use Megaport Cloud Router for this one. And I want to turn this up as close as possible to the cloud region. So I'm going to just type in Ashburn in the search window. And you can see I got a variety of options here. I'm going to use the top one here, which is CoreSite and Reston. And we'll just build this just for demo purposes. I'm just going to build a 1 gig cloud router. And I'll just put this on no term, but you can see you can, obviously get your price discounts if you put this on a term. And I'm going to assign a private AS number to this device here. So 64999. And I'll leave the BGP default state as enabled. You can, especially when you're doing a migration, some of my customers will turn these up as shutdown because they're more conservative. So maybe they'll want the layer 2 links up, make sure those are good, and then they'll come back and enable the BGP peers later. So you can option that if you want to. All right, so here's my MCR. And I'm going to go ahead and start building out my connections to match what I had back to the port here. So we'll start with AWS. And I'm going to do just a hosted VIF for this example, use my country filter just to narrow down my options. And you'll notice here I'm in CoreSite Reston, which happens to be the same location as my MCR. So I'm trying to reduce latency between clouds. So I'm going to use the local on-ramp in that facility. Select it here. And we'll just do new AWS MCR VXC. And we'll just do this 100 meg for the demo. And you can see I'm going to put no subscription. And this is just telling me that the IP attributes are going to be auto-configured if I click next. So I'm going to put in my AWS account information, which is saved in cache here, so it populated. And my AWS, I'm going to connect this to a Direct Connect gateway in AWS. So would be my Direct Connect gateway AS number. And I'll Megaport auth key. Assign an auth key to the BGP peer. I'll have it auto assign the IP addresses. and we'll add that. And then I'll, of course, add Azure next. Now, one thing I could do with Azure, you'll notice on my initial setup, I only used one connection to Azure. And of course, Azure recommends two connections using ExpressRoute. And so my ExpressRoute, I have, you see here on this screen, let me zoom in a little bit. You can see my ExpressRoute here. I have the primary subnet. This is connected to my port back at the data center, and I'm not using the secondary. So if you are using both, you could disconnect one for this activity and obviously use that secondary connection to connect to the MCR. If you're with a different provider, so this one's created with a Megaport as the provider, but if you're with a different provider, you would need a new ExpressRoute, or you could just create a new ExpressRoute and then plan on coming back later and deleting this one. For the demo, I'm just going to use the secondary subnet since I'm not using it right now. So I'm going to use this same service key. And you can see the primary is in use. It's kind of grayed out right here, but the secondary is available. Next. And my, you'll notice it says 50 meg here is my rate limit. That's because the ExpressRoute I created in Azure is a 50 meg ExpressRoute. And so it kind of pulls that through via API call. Obviously, if your ExpressRoute is bigger, it's going to give you a bigger option there. And you can see my components here, and I've built just about everything except for that connection back to the data center. So I still want to keep my data center in play. I'm just going to insert an MCR in Virginia, and I'll go through the use cases on why I'm doing this in a minute here when I show you the drawing. But I also want to build that link back to the data center. So from this cloud router, I'm going to just build a private connection back to the data center. And we'll just put 100 meg. And we'll just auto assign the VLAN, that's fine. And you'll notice here, I can now input my IP addresses. This is a private connection between the cloud router and the data center. So I can assign any RFC 1918 space for the IP address for the interface. I can also turn up dynamic routing, BGP peer. I don't have to, I could just use static routing, of course, but this allows me to do that. I'm going to leave it blank right now. Go back later and fill that out. All right, so here's all my components kind of in the shopping cart here. I'm going to order these, and while those are kicking off, there's a little bit of time because we're interfacing with these cloud providers. Some of them take 2, 3, 4 minutes to actually build out the connections on their side, and ours, of course. And so we'll go ahead and kick those off just so that that activity can take place. So you can see I'm starting to build this parallel network to my existing one down here. Let me go back to my drawing. And so I started out with this drawing, and what I've just built is essentially inserting a Megaport cloud router in Virginia for local cloud-to-cloud routing. So that's great, right? Obviously, now I have the ability to go between Azure and AWS in this case, sub 5 millisecond type of performance. I can also connect back to the data center. So I'm not losing any functionality, except I'm increasing the ability for, higher performance connection between these two clouds. I'm also reducing that impact as far as network load on the data center. So all that traffic before, if you remember, was going Azure data center back to AWS. So I'm wrapping that through my data center. And so that network load is being moved off the data center to the MCR. The other thing is I'm now no longer dependent on the data center, right? So for whatever reason, you're doing a maintenance activity or anything like that on that network device that it was terminated on, anything happens there, I still have my cloud-to-cloud connectivity up and running, right? So I'm no longer dependent on that. In my mind, so this is great. This is kind of an entry into what we would call like a virtual POP, right? So you kind of you're building a more robust solution with the Megaport Cloud Router here. But this also allows you to expand into future solutions. So let me show you that, what you can do with this. So I'm just kind of layering on Megaport Virtual Edge in this case. And I'm showing you, off here to the left. So this is all now existing, right? I built this out. I build a connection over to a Megaport Virtual Edge in that same data center. So that core site Virginia data center. And now I'm integrating it into like an SD-WAN environment off to the left here. And so this could be, Cisco SD-WAN or Aruba SD-WAN, right? And so now all of these edge sites can access the cloud directly without necessarily having to go through the data center. And so it just kind of abstracts that network layer off your data center. The data center becomes kind of a cloud region, so to speak, right? A private cloud. You might have, legacy apps there that aren't, cloud ready. And so it just becomes another connection off to the cloud. But now that network layer is on a neutral party, right? Megaport, not necessarily with the cloud provider, but that middle mile layer you're kind of taking out, and you're giving yourself a lot more flexibility to do different things with the network. So this kind of sets up that environment for kind of a future SD-WAN integration as well. All right, so we'll go back to kind of this simple setup here, and we'll see how the connections are coming along. So you can see here AWS is looking green. So that's good. MCR is up. So AWS is up, and we'll kind of hop over to AWS, and I think we have to accept that connection before the peer comes up. Let's see here. So this is our new one. So existing is down here at the bottom. The new one is right here. And yeah, just have to accept this guy, attach it to my gateway. And that'll take AWS take another minute or two, but you can see pending state, BGP down, that'll come up here shortly. You can see some of those network attributes got pushed in though. So my MCR is AS64999, which got pushed into AWS here. BGP auth got pushed in. I got IP addresses allocated and assigned, and you can see those here. If I go over here to Azure, so what I'm going to want to do is just make sure this is an existing express route, if you remember. Just want to make sure my IP attributes got allocated, properly. So I'm using this /30 for the interface on the secondary. So I'll keep that in mind, and we'll go back here to Megaport. We'll just take a look at these components real quick. So AWS here, we can see the interface got assigned. That's great. This is all, new connection, should turn up no problem. I could do some things here just to show you this real quick. So if I wanted to, I can enable some kind of advanced features, BGP features. You could see path prepending or meds. The reason why I might want to use this for this activity that we're talking about, like a migration, is if you wanted to depreference this route, so maybe you're keeping the route up to the data center, you want to turn up the MCR, turn up the BGP peers, but maybe depreference it from a traffic standpoint until you're comfortable to move the traffic off of there. So you might use some of these tools like AS path prepending to make the traffic go a certain way. So this looks good. Yeah, no problem there. BGP is not live yet, but it'll come up here shortly. And we'll go back to Azure, and we're just going to check that IP interface, and you can see it got assigned local 93, Azure 94, which I'm pretty sure was the right subnet. Yep. And that's Azure's AS number, and then my local AS number. So all those attributes got populated properly. That looks good. And using that connection on the secondary subnet here. And this one's showing BGP live now, so that's good. BGP up, cool. And so one of the things you could do here with Megaport Cloud Router, which is pretty cool, is you could look at some of this, just network attributes, route tables, stuff like that, so that we could see these kind of from this type of view. You remember AWS was still down, and so we'll just kind of, that'll come up here shortly. Azure's up, of course, so that's connected and up, so that's good. The Azure network I don't have connected to a VNet, so my express route's not connected over to a VNet, so we're not going to learn any routes from Azure. On AWS, I do have my Direct Connect gateway connected to VPC, so eventually when that peer comes up, I'm going to dynamically learn that subnet on the MCR. I'll also learn it, of course, on the Azure side, so that'll give me that direct route between Azure and AWS that I was looking for. All right, so this is pretty much it, guys. Like I said, another minute or two, that next peer is going to come up, and the only other activity I need to do is, once I'm comfortable, I've moved my traffic over, I'm using the new connection, I can then go back and delete this connection to Azure, the primary connection here, and I can delete my AWS connection, those existing connections. I'm still going to have my port in the data center. I'm still going to have this connection that goes over to the MCR. What I might want to do, though, of course, is set up the primary and secondary. So once I delete this primary connection on the port, I would, ideally go with Azure's recommendation, get that SLA, and turn that primary up on the MCR, of course, here. But yeah. That's about it, guys. So let me just check. I don't see any questions in the queue. So pretty short and sweet. You can, reach out to your sales executive, reach out to Megaport if you're not a customer. On our website, we'll reach out to you and get in touch with you. I'd love to have these conversations. Every customer has unique challenges, and so what I did today was kind of a high level of migrating to an MCR, but of course we have great tools and solution architects that'll help you along the way, make sure we do kind of specific to your organization and get it done right. So thanks for coming by today and listening to this Friday's session of Tech Drop-In. We'll talk to you guys next time.